This incident happened a year and a half ago. I just moved into my first apartment and was in the process of moving in. The door that led into my apartment locks itself automatically when closed. So I was going to the entrance of the apartment complex to get my mail while talking on the phone with my boyfriend. I returned to my apartment and sat on the bed while opening the mail while using the phone. I dropped the phone on the floor and it landed under the bed, so I had to lie on the floor and stretch for it. I saw something that caught my eye. There was someone under my bed. My eyes widened and I choked the urge to scream. The person under my bed was lying still with his back towards me and his head to his chest, so I couldn't see his face. And he didn't see me. Trying to be rational while so many thoughts rushed through my head, I picked up the phone, said, "Sorry I dropped my phone, I'm just gonna take a shower and call you back." The bathroom is right by my bed, so I hastily walked in, quietly locked the door, turned the shower on, jumped out my window, my apartment is on the first floor, and called the police. They told me to wait nearby but to go 2 across the street and see if anyone comes out the door to the apartment complex. This was during summer and it was still light out. I placed myself across the street, hiding behind a car while watching my open bathroom window and the entry door. I called my boyfriend and he came to me just before the police. I gave them my keys and they went inside. Only moments later, 2 cops came out holding a thin and tired-looking man. His eyes looked crazy, but he didn't try to get away. The policeman that had stood beside me and comforted me while the police searched through my house told me that the man stood outside my bathroom door with one of my kitchen knives, waiting for me to come out. This man had somehow crept in my entry door while I was getting my mail and hid under the bed. The man that was trying to hurt me turned out to be a homeless person and was placed in a mental hospital. My boyfriend moved in with me the very next day. Had a schizophrenic meth head break into my house while my son was home and I was at work. My 12-year-old was on Christmas break from school and decided to sleep in my bed with me the night before to watch a movie. When I got up for work in the morning, I left him to sleep in my bed. It's a small, safe town and he's responsible, so I didn't have any issue leaving him for the few days, and I still had to work before leaving for Christmas holidays. I had been at work for an hour when he texted me and told me someone was in the house. I immediately thought it was one of our friends dropping off Christmas baking or something and texted back, "Who is it?" And he responded, "I don't know, they told the dogs not to bark and wake me up." I thought that was odd, so I drove home and checked around, not seeing anything. Went to my room and he was covered up in the blankets. I got him out of bed. He's telling me he saw someone. Didn't hear them leave. So I brought him upstairs to check the cameras. Once upstairs waiting for the camera recordings to load, he went to the washroom. I had a weird feeling, so I thought I'd better check the closet in my room. As soon as I walked in the closet and turned the light on, I saw him hiding in the corner. I was immediately furious. I yelled at him and called the police. I waited with him while he rocked back and forth, sitting on the floor for the police to come. I wasn't sure what he was on, but he wasn't aggressive towards me. Police arrested him, and then once he was back at the detachment, he attacked a female cop and tried to get her gun to shoot her. Once it was all over, everything sunk in and it took a long time to get over that fear. I had to force myself to check the spot he was hiding every time I went in my closet, to tell my brain he wasn't there. I'm a pretty predictable person, with a predictable schedule, so I'm not sure if this was a random occurrence or if someone knew my nightly routine. I'm a 35-year-old woman. My husband Rob gets up for work hours before me, so he goes to bed before I do. I usually get to bed a few hours after he does, around the same time every night. I turn off the lights and TV in the living room and take my dog to the back door to let her out. She's tiny, old, and poses zero threat to anyone. The door leads to a large deck outside. Off to the right of the deck is a few steps down and a small path to the gate, which we always keep chained and locked. Every single night before opening the door, I peek out of the window right next to it without disturbing the blinds and flip on the deck light. I never expect anyone to be there, and we've never had a problem with anyone trespassing or trying to break in. It's just something I do every night. Kinda like peeking behind the shower curtain before I pee. I know no one is back there, but if I don't check, then that's going to be the one time that there actually is someone hiding there. I watch a ton of horror movies, and it's pitch black outside at night where I live. So a few nights ago, I got ready for bed, went to the back door with my dog slowly following behind me, and peeked out the window. I flipped on the light. My heart jumped into my throat when I saw a skinny, dirty guy standing off to the side of the door facing it. I see him raise his arm up and hold a screwdriver above his head as soon as the light went on, preparing for someone to open the door. I screamed, "Rob, get up, get the gun," as loud as I could, which startled the guy, and he jumped over the rail of the deck and ran. My husband ran out of our bedroom with his gun. He called the police and they showed up within 5 minutes. They drove around trying to find the guy, but no luck. The guy broke the lock on our gate to get in. He also pried open the back screen door, which we always keep locked as well. If I would have opened the door without looking out first, I might be dead. I don't know if I caught the guy trying to break in, or if he was waiting for me to open the door like I do every night. Either way, it was terrifying. After this incident, my parents are buying us outdoor security cameras this week as an early birthday present for Rob. I would occasionally ask my mother if she had any scary real-life stories she could scare me with. She chose not to mention this one until I was old enough to hear it. This story takes place in Canada during the late 60s about my grandmother. When grandmother was in her early 30s, she decided to drive to our town's convenience store after dark to pick up a couple things. She had finally just managed to get her 4 children to sleep and left my grandfather to take over while she hopped in the car and made the 10-minute drive. Back then, the road from their house to the store had very few neighbors and was mostly just woods on either side of the 2 lanes. After buying the couple things she needed, she left the store and jumped back into her car, pulling out onto the road for her route home. A minute into the drive, she hears what sounds like newspaper rustling in the back of the car. She checks her rearview mirror to find out the cause of it. Instead of seeing the usual empty road or a set of headlights, reflecting back was a man's face in the back seat. Scared to death, she instantly hit the brakes, hard enough to shock this man, and jumped out of the car and began screaming loud enough so people near the store could hopefully hear. Having this man's plan failed, he took this opportunity to escape the car and ran into the woods, out of sight. After getting back to the store and calling the police, my grandmother found a cloth covered in chloroform in the back seat. Luckily, a couple from a house nearby heard my grandmother's screams, helped calm her down, and took her home. My grandfather said that she was unable to speak for hours, only able to muster up the necessary details for the police. She didn't drive for 6 months after this incident. The man was never caught. To give some background information, this event occurred a little over a year ago, and I still haven't been able to get over it. I'm a 22-year-old female, and at the time I was 21. My family and I had recently moved to a new town and a new house. I was home from college, and my parents had left for the week to celebrate their wedding anniversary with their friends, who lived several hours away. It had been a few days since my parents left, and I hadn't had any problems. They'd sent me a couple messages on Facebook letting me know that they arrived to their friend's house safely and were having a good time. The day had gone well, and I was sure to check that I'd locked all the doors of the house once the sun started to go down. It was about 11 p.m., and I was doing my nightly routine of laying in bed and messing around on the computer when I suddenly got this sinking feeling of dread. I felt as if I was being watched. It was summer and we didn't have air conditioner, so I had a large box fan in the window blowing the cool night air into my hot room. But once that feeling settled over me, I decided that I should remove the fan and close the window. Once removing the fan, shutting and locking the window and pulling down the curtain, I felt a bit better. I lay back in bed and tried to continue what I was doing, though I didn't put my headphones back on. After a few minutes, I began to hear something that sounded like light scratching. I sat still in bed, listening to the sound, trying to pinpoint what it was and if I recognized it at all. Our new house, although relatively close in distance to our neighbors, had a fair amount of forest around it. I thought the scratching may have been an animal, or someone's dog that got loose and wanted to come inside. After a few minutes, the scratching stopped, and everything returned to silence. So I figured that I was probably right, and that it must have been an animal. My relief was short-lived. As soon after the scratching stopped, from the other side of the wall, I began to hear slow footsteps descending into the basement. There was no way I could get out of the house without walking past the basement stairs. We didn't have a house phone, and at the time I was in the process of getting a new cell phone because mine was broken beyond repair. I sat there for a few seconds wondering what the hell I should do. I knew that I would need to get out of the house as soon as possible, and that the more time I wasted, the worse it would be for me. I thinking jumping out of my bedroom window, but it was far enough off the ground that there was a good chance I would end up getting hurt if I did. Not to mention that if I jumped out the window and hurt myself, I wouldn't be able to run for help, and I would be right next to the door that whoever was in my house had gone in through. So, I decided to very carefully and quietly open my door and peek out around the corner, and if the coast was clear, I would make a mad dash for the front door and sprint to my neighbor's house. I very slowly opened my bedroom door, letting my eyes adjust to the darkness of the house, before creeping around the corner and looking to see if I was safe to make a run for it. What I saw nearly made me vomit. As my eyes scanned the house, I noticed that something was off. I squinted hard as I looked over at the basement stairs and was able to make out the shape of a man. What made it worse, he wasn't just standing at the top of the stairs, he was crawling up them like some kind of nightmare creature. I quickly backed into my room again, shutting and locking the door as quietly as I could. I didn't think he'd seen me, but there was no way that I was going to make a run for it now. My only choice was to pop the screen and jump out the window. As I was unlocking and opening my window, I heard the handle to my bedroom door turn. Once the man realized that it was locked, in a sickeningly sweet voice, "I know you're in there." This was followed by a loud cackle, and what I can only imagine was him throwing himself at full force against my door. I ripped the screen out of the window and flung myself out. I landed wrong on my right foot, and I was sure that I'd hurt my ankle, but at the time, I couldn't think of anything other than getting as far away as possible. I got up and ran as fast as I could to my neighbor's house, knocking on their door and ringing the bell over and over. I looked over at my house as I was yelling for my neighbors to let me in, and I swear to God, I could see the man standing at my window, waving at me. My neighbors finally opened the door after what felt like forever, and I managed to explain well enough what was going on for them to let me in and call the police. I stayed with them until the police arrived. The police searched my house and found that the lock to the basement had been picked, and that the door to my bedroom was hanging off the hinges. They weren't able to find the man anywhere, and because I had only seen him for a split second in the dark, I couldn't provide them with a good description of him. I got into contact with my parents immediately, and they hurried home. The police took my statement and searched the area for the man, but they came up with nothing. What really bothers me about all of this is that nothing was stolen. There wasn't even any evidence that the guy had looked through anything while he'd been in my house.